Looking to buy, sell, or grow your business to position it for a sale? As the owner and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, Domenic Rinaldi has personally been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. He has seen and done it all, consulting with large and small businesses across a broad range of industries. On M&A Unplugged, he'll interview buyers, sellers, and their advisors about their experiences scaling, selling, and acquiring businesses. On every episode, you will get key learnings, but most importantly, you will be better prepared for your own acquisition or sale. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
My guest today, Jonathan Banta, fits squarely in the category of serial entrepreneur. He has led several businesses through the sale and recapitalization process, and he's currently the CEO of Preferred Dermatology Partners in McKinney, Texas. I also count Jonathan as a longtime business associate and friend. We go back almost 25 years. Jonathan, can you believe that? That's just unbelievable.
Time flies.
It sure does, man. Jonathan successfully led 2 organizations through the business sale process and is currently navigating robust growth with Preferred Dermatology through a combination of organic efforts and strategic acquisitions. On the organic side, Jonathan and his team have continued to increase its service offerings to include things like dermatology, radiology, cosmetology, and a plethora of other services, while from the research I've done, paying meticulous attention to client experience and satisfaction. In addition, Jonathan has overseen the growth of Preferred from 3 locations in 2012 to 13 today, which makes them one of the largest practices in North Texas. A lot of derm going on down in Texas with all that sunshine, huh?
Absolutely. It's inevitable that you will see a dermatologist if you live down here.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So prior to operating Preferred Dermatology, Jonathan was the founding partner of Concero Partners, a software integration company, which he built and sold to Tech Ally Solutions. We'll be talking with Jonathan today about his experiences in preparing and selling businesses, both Preferred and Concero. In his spare time, I understand Jonathan's a barbecue pit master. Jonathan, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. I love that Southern barbecue.
You get baptized really quick down here.
So I'm so happy to have you here today. And I'm just curious, let's start with, what's your specialty on the barbecue?
It's the 2 big things are obviously the brisket and the barbecue pulled pork.
Loving me some brisket. Loving me. Do you have a secret to the brisket that you'd be willing to share?
Low and slow. It's done when it's done. Just take your time. You have to have a good pit that retains heat. A couple choices of wood, pecan or hickory. Post oak is a really good one.
Nice. Well, I bet nobody counted on getting that advice here today. I'll look forward to getting some next time I'm down there.
Absolutely.
Hey, so let's start with the sale of Concero. That was the first business that you owned and operated, software integration company, a deal that you sold to an industry insider, Tech Allies. Tell me how that deal came about. Tell us a little bit about Concero, and then we'll go through that deal in a little more detail.
Yeah, basically kind of life after our being at Sprint together, you and I, after completing my master's program, I had written a business plan for a small company and it actually took a left turn into SAP, software implementation integration company, a small firm out of Cincinnati. And that founding partner, we actually ended up selling that company about a year to 18 months after I was there, and which led to my move from Cleveland to Dallas. Stayed on in that acquisition with a group that was still based in Cleveland for about 2 years through an earnout period, and then basically had to sit out for a year. And then I started Concero Partners. So from the ground up, it was SAP, and we migrated into a lot of Microsoft.NET consulting. We had some flagship clients like Lockheed Martin, Fossil, CompUSA, and built that over about a 10-year run. And I had a business partner involved in that who was basically an Oracle DBA. And the Tech Allies was founded by the original founder of AF Kelly, which is who I went to a few years earlier. So circled all the way back around, and that group bought our company, Consero Partners.
So did you take Consero out to the market in an auction sort of process, or was this just a deal that came together because the two companies knew each other and through some other discussions kind of made sense to go down the acquisition path?
Yeah, it was certainly a relationship sale. It did not go to market. We did not use any intermediary. There were certain synergies, and I think for both parties, they were looking to get into the Texas market, a lot of oil and gas on the SAP front. We had a very good reputation with our clients locally, and them being based in Cincinnati and the kind of the Great Lakes area. We were able to add value to each other's companies. So when you put the two together, it really had a nice presentation.
Yeah, that's nice. But let me ask you, how did you get comfortable that you were getting fair market value without taking it out to the market?
We had been through this before, and that's probably a really good question as you go through M&A process. A lot of the type of business, there's general financial model that a lot of the groups will follow in putting a value on a business. So the crude math equation for a professional services company back then was roughly 1 times revenue. And then generally what you are fighting for in a scenario like that is how much of it is upfront and how much of it is earn out.
Yeah. So how did you get informed around that? The 1 times revenue and the economic and the payout of that?
Yeah, and we pretty much followed the blueprint from the sale that we had gone through 10 years earlier.
Got it. And so integration, you bring in two companies together, sounds like it was a really nice fit, maybe somewhat accretive for Tech Allies. How did you get through integration? Were there bumps in the road?
No, it was very seamless. Well, we knew each other, so there was a good cultural fit. There was just a lot of initial synergy. We brought together different clients and talked about, we moved into our clients here. We had some mobility applications that Tech Allies had already developed. So we were integrating new products and services to existing clients. And then we were bringing a different .NET development platform to some of their existing SAP clients. So it was, if you want to call it cross-pollination or something of that nature, but the ability to cross-sell through functional services.
Yeah. So I've been involved in a bunch of transactions where two entities are coming together and, they're going to be able to take advantage of each other's product offerings and cross-sell. Did that come to fruition at the end of the day?
Yeah, there was a lot of, and mine was really basically, I had already begun the process of managing the dermatology group. So my ability to stay on long-term was going to be limited either way. And they had taken steps to get introductions to some key personnel of theirs that were down in the Texas market already. So it's more of a handoff and transition and kind of let them develop and run those going forward.
Got it. So we're going to make our way into preferred dermatology and the process there. And you recapitalized that business by selling it to a private equity group. But before we go there, what did you learn from your previous transaction and the transaction with Consero about the sale process, about diligence, integration? What were the key takeaways for you that you then brought to preferred? And we'll get to the preferred transaction, but just interested to know what you learned from those two transactions.
Yeah, I think the original one from 97, 98, in which the move came down to Dallas, that one was a little more bumpy. And that was the first experience with a group where I felt that you really need to be aligned with either your private equity group or your new partner in business going forward. I think what you don't want to have is either from the buyer's end or the seller's end, some remorse after the fact. And I think that's really key in anybody that's looking to sell or buy a practice or a business, that you have the right partner.
So how did you get comfortable that you thought you had the right partner? Because I think that point is very well taken. We oftentimes will see either a seller or a buyer, feeling some remorse. And when we go back to it, we understand what the keys are, but I'm interested to hear how you got there.
Well, I think, a lot of it was, the first time around, you had to experience it. And from my perspective, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that was just a learning process. You have to go through that, and you just don't want to make that same mistake. And I think a lot of people on the business side, they really don't do enough diligence. I think they hear dollars, or they see dollars, or they get a dollar amount presented to them, and they really zero in on that versus understanding what does the long-term transition look like? What is the exit strategy at the next level, or if there is one, and what's your bite of that apple the second go round? Some people just want the check.
Yeah, so we advise clients on this all the time, and we tell them it's not just about the money and the terms. It's about all these other things that you're referring to. How did you get comfortable in your transaction? And did you get comfortable that you were picking the right partner?
Yeah, I think the third go round was the most, I was the most educated from that perspective. I really helped the primary owner of the practice, help him determine maybe the potential pitfalls. A lot of PE-backed groups were coming through Dallas. Dermatology is still a hot acquisition specialty right now.
Yeah. So before we get to dermatology, though, I want to stick with your Kinsero, because that was sort of your on the ground MBA that then set you up for this next transaction. But I think it's really important for people to hear, what did you go through in those early transactions that then really set you up to have a nice transaction in preferred?
The first transaction from 98, the group was out of Cleveland. I think they had buyer's remorse. I think that deal was 75% cash and 25% earnout. And I think that some companies, when you are not aligned on the go forward path, I think, they're good partners and they're bad partners. And in the case of a bad partner, I think if there's an earnout involved, they might want to do anything in their power not to pay the earnout. They already have something. If it's not producing, or if it's flat, depending on what that earnout is tied to, if it's EBITDA, if it's net profit, there are little ways and loopholes to circumvent paying out more cash to an existing asset.
Yeah, you've just given the M&A Unplugged podcast community a big nugget here, earnouts. And for those of you listening to this episode, I hear a lot of stories about earnouts, and they make sense in the right situation, and they can be very good. But as Jonathan is pointing out, they can also be bad. And the devil is in the details, how they get crafted, how your advisors bring you through that. And I will tell you, this is where advisors really make a big difference. And I'm not just talking about M&A advisors like myself. I'm talking about M&A accountants and attorneys who go through a lot of deals and understand how to craft an earnout so that you can avoid a lot of the misunderstandings that can naturally happen. Because for people who don't understand what an earnout is, it is a promise for future payments if certain things happen. And those things could be any number of things. It could be revenue, it could be adjusted EBITDA, it could be key employees staying with the business, client retention. And so it really is an area where people can get tripped up quite a bit. And so, Jonathan, thank you so much. That is a key nugget, is around earnouts and understanding, what you're getting into when you agree to do something like that.
The safest advice I would give anybody, even going down this road, and in healthcare right now, I would avoid any sort of terminology of an earnout or a seller note or things of that nature. And the advice that I even gave the physician here is, be happy with what you get at close, and you have to assume that you will not get any seller note or earnout dollars down the road. And if you're okay with that, then I would move forward from the financial component of it.
Yeah. And the thing I would add to that is, just to play off of that, is anything that you don't get at the closing table is certainly at risk. But there is a way to protect that risk. There's thoughtful ways to go about it so that you can secure those payments if you're the seller. And as a buyer, you want to make sure that you've gotten true value. So again, I think it comes back to, do you have the right advisors that can bring you through that funnel? All right. So Jonathan, anything else about your experience in Kinsero before you then moved over to preferred? Because then I want to move into that.
Yeah, that was really from a life cycle perspective and a career perspective. the decrease in the marketplace for SAP implementation partners was lowering. So that was really an industry move for me, because what you could see back then was companies like SAP and Oracle, they were bringing more and more of those consulting services in-house, because they were figuring out really quick that if the software cost was X, the implementation cost was usually 3X of that number. So they were leaving a lot of money on the table, and they were slowly getting rid of the bigger implementation partners. And you could just see the downturn in the opportunity for a boutique firm like ourselves.
Yeah. So let's move on to preferred. And by the way, I'm just so amazed at what you were able to do here. And excuse me for saying this, but, we're very proud of you as somebody who's known you for many years. I mean, you went from, software implementation, and you now move over into derm. I mean, I guess that's the equivalent, if you look at diving, like a triple gainer with a double twist and a backflip thrown in there, right? I mean, how did you make that leap? I mean, what was it that got you from software implementation over to derm? And then let's get into that transaction.
When we sold, originally when I knew I was selling Concero, it was, what's the next step, right? And I thought perhaps I would just be an independent contractor and go manage software projects or sponsor software projects for companies. And through a third-party friend, ended up getting introduced to Dr. Matthew Barrows, and he was kind of on this cusp. He had these ideas, hey, I want to have a little bigger footprint, not sure how to get there. I'm a doctor, I didn't go to business school. And as you know, and many people that go to any sort of family practice or any sort of specialty, their model is not to have a business person or a business team. They pretty much have an office manager or practice manager, and they're very task oriented, running day-to-day operations. I don't think they understand, how to grow a business and expand profit and margins and services and look for things to improve patient experience. I don't even think they're really a good understanding of what they need to do to better the ultimate financial model of the company.
Got it. So you got introduced to Dr. Barrows, and tell me, how did you guys decide to get in the business together? And was there one location at the time when you joined?
There were 2 up and running locations. A third one was just launching. It was him and 3 mid-level providers. We talked about things like exit strategy. It was just an initial high-level business meeting. I just started asking him questions, what he wanted to do and how long you want to do this. And, do you want to do this till you fall over? Do you want to take on partners? Do you want to sell the whole thing and walk away? And through the course of that conversation, I think he felt that I could add some value, and I felt this would be a great opportunity. It was local, and it was a new challenge.
So was the understanding that you were coming on to essentially build this up and package it so that you can have an exit or a recapitalization?
No, initially that was not the plan.
Okay.
The plan was he was just unaware from an operational perspective where he was bleeding. So he could see some revenues, but he can in turn, and this was really, kind of checkbook management back then, how much was left over for him. And he could see growth on the collection side, but he really wasn't seeing growth on the income side. So not really understanding where your burn is in certain areas, or if you have leakage or things of that nature, where your inefficiencies are. And, I told him, I'd come in and just start trimming the fat and try to identify areas of improvement, kind of lean it up before you take on new opportunities and services for your patients.
Got it. Okay. So you led the effort to bring more operational efficiencies in. And then I'm assuming you also led the effort to start to add on new services. And when did you start to make acquisitions to add on locations?
Those were just opportunistic things, just having, our model really was organic growth. And once we got very efficient in how we did things operationally, and I really wasn't getting too granular in looking at things always in a dermatology light, I really tried to look at everything from a patient perspective. What is attractive if I'm looking for a dermatologist? And he was very leveraged into just a couple of key areas within that specialty. And I thought that was a potential risk for him as well. So every year you're dealing with, cutbacks for reimbursements. And all we tried to do was, just like any portfolio, we try to diversify those revenue streams.
Got it. You're on the other side of the equation. You were a seller before, and now you're in a position of acquiring. So you did two acquisitions, is that right, before the recapitalization?
We did.
You said you were opportunistic about those. Were those practices that came to you and said they'd be interested in selling out, or did you go out and proactively find them?
They came to us in two different third-party representations. They fit what we were trying to accomplish in terms of where we wanted our footprint geographically here in North Texas. So we were selective in some of the organic development areas, and these just came up as a great opportunity to pick up. What you're essentially picking up is a patient database. And in both cases, they were in excess of 20-year practices located in their same buildings. They had a brand, and both physicians, ironically, knew Dr. Barrows. So there was a very high comfort level that they weren't getting bought by a corporate-owned company, and that there was still going to be a kind of a localized family feel going forward.
Got it. So you acquire those practices. Did those doctors then wind up staying with you, or did you need to get new providers?
In both scenarios, the doctor exit was going to be, I think, a 1-year stay and then exit, which would obviously give us time to transition for new physicians or new providers. In one case, that the physician in the second acquisition is still with us today, and she wants to stay as long as we'll have her. So, and I think a lot of times what changes the mindset is they're no longer dealing with the business aspect of it and then go back to what they originally loved, and that was just treating the patients.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So you're an acquirer now. You had been a seller before, and now you're making these acquisitions. What did you learn in acquiring those two locations?
Probably the biggest thing, and to my fault and to our fault, is we probably weren't as diligent on the analytics side as it was to us when we were being acquired through our current private equity group. And that's been a really good learning experience. We basically did enough due diligence and reviewed the book of business and the financial analytics that were presented to us. And we did some QA and some billing and coding reviews. But the level in which most of these acquisitions happen, it is exponentially greater than what we did on our end to go by what would be considered a very small acquisition nonetheless.
Yeah. So if you were to do it again, what would you do differently this time in acquiring to shore up those analytics and what we term as diligence?
Right. So the process in which we followed to be acquired by the private equity group, we would do that. We would implement that same process going forward with other potential acquisitions. And we've had conversations with some other folks locally here in Dallas and just outside of Dallas. But the best thing now is the bandwidth and some of the support of people who are true analysts that do that diligence on a daily basis. And that obviously wasn't my strong suit. I'd never gone into it at that level, certainly from a CFO or a financial analyst position. And it's just great to have a partner now going forward where we have that opportunity to lean on those people heavily.
Yes, you just gave us another nugget there, which is, it's so important during the diligence phase to bring in subject matter experts. As a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have in an episode senior partner from a CPA firm here in Chicago, Tad Render from Miller Cooper, and he's going to talk specifically about diligence and how to go through it. And so, yeah, Jonathan, I hear this so often that, people cut corners or maybe didn't fully contemplate all that goes into diligence. And we tell clients this all the time, you really have to pay particular attention. In some industries, it gets even beyond, way beyond the numbers. You've got compliance issues, all sorts of things that need to be contemplated, irrespective of what happens when you have to consider integration, the cultural issues, the HR issues, human capital, all of those sorts of things.
That's a really good point. And that's probably the biggest change for us going forward. I think everybody zeroes in on, and the docs today in healthcare and some of these healthcare acquisitions, be it dentistry or orthopedics or gastro or dermatology, which is, one of the hotter acquisition targets going on in the country right now, and specifically in Dallas. But I think everybody zeroes in on the financials and the quality of earnings, but I'm telling you, one of the biggest pitfalls in healthcare is the governance and compliance. So the billing and coding review process is paramount in any acquisition. If you're a buyer, that look back window, if billing and coding has not been done properly, either intentionally or inadvertently, things like Medicare, that is not an audit that you would want to deal with, because as the new owner, albeit an asset acquisition, you are still going to be liable for that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Jonathan, you're building up the practice. You've got some acquisitions you've made. You're getting more efficient. And then this opportunity comes your way, a private equity group that's really focused on your space approaches you, and they're interested in potentially getting a larger footprint in Dallas. Bring me through what transpired there. Did they reach out to you directly? What happened from there?
6 months after starting here 7 years ago, we wanted to let's look at what the value is of the practice today at 7 years ago. So we went through this exercise and had a corporate value placed on us, evaluation, kind of a 90-day due diligence phase that, where you're under exclusivity and NDA. And then we, over time, probably sat through about 9 or 10 different PE-backed platforms that kind of came through town wanting to acquire us. And, we listened to every presentation and just, you're trying to find this right partner. This bubble's so great. Can you afford not to be a part of something bigger, or to, from Dr. Barrow's perspective, how can I mitigate risk? I want to continue to grow, but I'm personally guaranteeing all my loans and leases to new locations. And how do you remove some of that risk on his end and continuing your growth to where you're not compromising future insurance contracts? If it ends up 3 or 4 big players in Dallas, you certainly have a risk that you might not have a certain commercial payer contract that you can be a part of. So
Jonathan, tell me, how did you first start the conversations with this private equity group? Did they approach you? And what transpired from there?
So as we went through some of these, this was actually we were involved in a meeting with this group through a dermatopathology group. That relationship and that building process kind of went over a 6-month period. And then their model was very different. We were really attracted to it. And they had acquired 4 other companies in the previous 7 years. They are a business as usual type group. They don't make changes to the management team. They look for certain qualities of any potential acquisition. And as we had deeper conversations with them, we were on their radar. We really liked what they had to offer and what their plan was. And we were really just trying to protect our culture, protect our clinical experience, protect our patient experience, and protect our employees. And I think as we had these conversations and, we entered into due diligence phase with them to explore what this would look like. We had enough knowledge and history and experience with the other PE-backed groups to we knew where we were going to land on the dollars. It was just would everything else fit?
So you had other conversations with other private equity groups about potentially selling, and you had gotten some sort of indications of interest from them. So you, from a value perspective, you had a rough range of value. Is that right?
Yeah, they were all pretty close. So everything's EBITDA, and then what are you getting as a multiple of that, right? And we felt, we were considered by many to be a prime acquisition target. We had diversified and expanded the service offering to patients, bringing in dermatopathology in-house. So radiation services, there was a heavy beef up in the cosmetic side. We use a plastic surgeon to do closure. So if you went to our website, we had a really strong online presence, really good reviews on Google. So all that SEO and that branding and that imaging that we worked so hard for is really starting to present itself to other companies looking at us and saying, we're checking all the boxes. And if you were a patient and you went to our website, you can see, I have options. And that was really what it was all about from a patient experience perspective.
Yeah. Were you, you guys were obviously building a practice here, right? You're doing acquisitions, you're making it more efficient, you're growing in lots of ways. Was there any thought that you were selling too soon, that you were selling before you had hit a critical mass that would have delivered you in maybe a higher multiple or a better EBITDA that against even the same multiple, so you could have gotten a better walkaway, or was it really just time for you to take chips off the table and join up with a larger group?
And I'm probably going to butcher this answer for you because there's a lot of touch points on there that you referred to where I was trying to make, where I'd like to make a point. And that was, and I use this example all the time, instead of getting acquired by some of the other traditional PE-backed groups, we're acquired and get rolled into their platform. I like to tell people we became our own platform, which was very different. And we had long conversations internally. Hey, is this too soon? Or I'm a little more of a bird in the hand guy. We were getting an extremely attractive multiple of EBITDA, removing some of that risk from Dr. Barrow's perspective to continue this growth was key, while you get a very nice check in the hand today, as well as ownership in our new platform going forward. So you will be rewarded with equity in the go forward plan. So do you take what you get today? Would this bubble burst next year and we're not going to see the multiple that we got, meaning you could double your equity, but if the multiple's half, essentially the net is the same. And of course, every year you run the risk of what does government healthcare look like? So you never know what you're going to get reimbursement wise or what cuts you're going to face on a year-to-year basis.
Yeah. So, going back to your earlier comment, from things you learned a long time ago, you talked about alignment, right? And it sounds like you had a perfect outcome here, because we call this a recapitalization, right? You didn't sell 100% of the business. You sold a good portion of the business. You've got a great partner that's willing to invest in your business, but now you're growing it together, and they're giving you the autonomy to do that, but under the umbrella not of only their capital, but probably of their expertise and their team. Potentially somewhere down the road, there's a second bite at the apple, and you've got maybe even a much bigger payday.
That's correct.
That's great. Look, it's all about what matters to you, right? So it sounds like you could have continued to grow this on yourself, increased your EBITDA, and maybe gotten a higher number at the end of the day initially, but this outcome long-term really makes much more sense for you. And it's just where you guys were at in your personal lives, as well as where the business was at.
That's correct. We would have had to have taken a step back if we were to continue down the road of doing everything in-house on our own without some third-party investment. We were thin on the bandwidth side. We probably would have had to utilize third parties just on the due diligence side. I think there was more and more attention given to who we were acquiring and what their history looked like and what risk we would have down the road versus just looking at the quality of earnings component.
So I'm sure diligence in this transaction was beyond anything you had seen before. You got a private equity group that you said has teams of analysts. They know how to do this, right? What did you learn? What were your key takeaways from this process, this acquisition process with this private equity group that really stuck with you?
The depth of analytics and the attention to detail, especially on the governance and compliance pieces of this, really shed some new light into how, even looking at us today, and how buttoned up we want to be for the next level, if and when there's a next level. Things that we've implemented on a go forward plan, bringing in a certified dermatology coder to audit charts on a quarterly basis with all of our providers, and then utilizing another third party to audit our own audit. So you're always prepared. You're always taking the steps necessary, HIPAA compliant, OSHA compliant. There's just a number of things that I think a lot of practices or businesses might not pay as much attention to, and they become very reactive. So when something happens, and naivety isn't going to get you off the hook. So you avoid writing a check, or in some cases, you read stories all the time where it can be criminal if you're dealing with government entities.
So during the diligence process, did they find anything? Did they come up with anything that was material that changed the deal at all? Or you fairly buttoned up and, some of this compliance stuff maybe came to the forefront, but it didn't change the value of the business?
We had no value change in the end, which is, I might even say it's rare. I haven't seen some of that, or some of the dollars associated with the back end or how it affects your equity going forward at the next level. I think we were pretty comfortable. This was the first healthcare specialty acquisition for this group. Like I said, they had 4 other disparate acquisitions that, they just look for key indicators of what they want to invest in with family wealth money, and not looking at it as a 5-year flip in their portfolio.
So you're settled in now. The acquisition is done. Where are you taking the practice now?
Yeah, we just had basically the 1-year anniversary. The transaction was May 1st of 2018. So we're 1 year into this. I think it's been a great learning experience for both parties. We still are continuing down the road, following our organic growth model, the blueprint that we've used over the previous 7 years. I think that was, really attractive to them initially. I think our people and virtual low to no turnover, that is very attractive to them. And we're just kind of staying the course, doing what we need to do, never really feeling like we're in a position that we're building this to sell it at any given time, but we'll always be in a position, should an opportunity present itself, to be compliant, to be buttoned up, to have maximized our profit and the ability to look for a top multiple as this EBITDA number grows. And, finding the right partner at the next level would be key as well.
And where do acquisitions stand as far as, where's that on your radar as far as growth goes?
Yeah, very selective. We're not out doing the EBITDA grab. We're not just